Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2023 action sequel, John Wick, Chapter 4. Now, John Wick Chapter 4, I gotta be honest, folks, it was one of my most anticipated films for the year of 2023. So I went into this with some pretty high expectations, and I know for some people, they feel that that's unfair. I respectfully disagree, because to me, this franchise has earned it. This installment earned higher expectations because of the fact that the first three were so good. The first three John Wick films to me are so great that they are up there with any other action classic from the 80s, 90s, or 2000s. I truly feel that way about those three films. It's one of those rare franchises that maintained its momentum throughout each installment, or actually improved upon previous installments, or upped the ante, or legitimately created some absolutely insane action set pieces that you haven't seen before, that were epic and badass and exciting and fun to watch, and anything but repetitive or the same old kind of stuff. So I went into chapter 4 with the same expectations that I had for the first three. And I feel it was justified. And I saw it on the big screen, and after it was over, I was disappointed. I'm not going to say that I think the film was terrible. I didn't think it was a bad movie. I understand why some people aren't fans of the film, but I also understand why people do enjoy it and liked it quite a bit. But it just was a letdown for me. And I'll get into why soon enough. But the film is directed by Chad Stahelski, who also directed the other three films. And his direction is definitely not a problem here. I mean, Chad is a master technician when it comes to directing action sequences, when it comes to showcasing sweeping locations that just are full of visual splendor. The way that he shoots club sequences is still some of the best that you'll ever see in anything. The various different action set pieces throughout this movie have some nice usage of camera angles, nice usage of different types of shot selection. Really do put you inside the action. There's not a lot of quick cuts. There's not a lot of shaky cam. I will say that there are a couple sequences that I feel could have used a bit more variety of angles, like the Dragon's Breath sequence. I really like the top-down view, but it gets old after a little bit, so I think it would have been nice to have kind of switched it up a little bit with maybe an over-the-shoulder shot, or, maybe some POV stuff, almost like a first-person shooter, something along those lines. But I still like that sequence, and I like the part of the staircase sequence with Donnie Yen and Keanu teaming up and fighting all the guys on the stairs. I even like some of the stuff with the Arc de Triomphe sequence with all the cars going around in circles, especially some of the stunt work during those scenes. I thought it was really impressive because that was, for the most part, a lot of that, at least from what I saw in the theater, it looked like it was done practically. There was some CGI at some point, but there was a lot of real cars whizzing by, and John and other stuntmen fighting. I mean, Keanu. But, I mean, at this point, Keanu is John Wick, so you can't blame me for getting confused. But yeah, it's just one of those things where, yeah, the direction is dynamic, it's strong, it's effective. It's good stuff. I mean, Stahelski definitely knows what he's doing when it comes to directing films, especially movies within the action genre. And John Wick 4 is no exception to that. Like, the direction is not really a problem. Where the problems arise for me is with the screenplay by Shea Hatton and Michael Finch. Now, I think Chad was also a little involved. Like, he's not listed, but you can definitely see some of his influence here because he was the one that really championed and wanted the more divisive ending. Well, I mean, he's not the only one because the test screening audience also liked it, but he's the one that was saying things in interviews that John Wick, he can't have a happy ending. So you can definitely feel his influence here. And I do feel the writing with chapter 4 is a step down from the writing in the previous 3 films. Derek Kolstad is sorely missed here. I know I seem to be in the minority when it comes to this, but I really do feel that Derek Kolstad's presence is missed significantly with this screenplay. He understands and gets who John Wick is as a character. He gets the universe of John Wick in a way that I don't think these writers technically do because they were really on the outside looking in. And more were honestly just fans of the first 3 films, but they didn't necessarily know exactly what made those films tick. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of repetitive, just recycled stuff in this script that comes across as, to be blunt, lazy. It comes across as really lazy. And what do I mean by that? Well, for instance, you have a character called the Tracker who has a dog, and the dog is trained. So the dog is involved in action sequences, and the dog is trained to do certain things, like bite some guy's balls or do this or that at a command by the Tracker character. Well, we already got that in John Wick 3 with Halle Berry's character, and we had 2 dogs, not just one. So that just felt like a rehash to me. That felt really lazy. Then there was just other stuff with this script where instead of having John go up against a high table and become this sort of like hard target sort of scenario, but in reverse, where John is the one that's hunting the bad guys and they're not the ones that are hunting him, that kind of thing. Uh Instead, it's just another excuse to get things back to where they were at the start of the last movie. It undoes the ticket thing that was in John Wick 3, and honestly, I think what John does to get his ticket back is a little too easy. All he does is have to take out fat Scott Adkins. Doesn't really seem like that much of a challenge, especially for John Wick. But it's just one of those things where, yeah, that felt like it was too easy. It also undid some of the stuff that happened in the last movie. And it's just one of those things where, okay, so all of this is just an excuse to get John to where he was at the beginning of the second movie, where now he has to do something in order to get out of a situation again. And the introduction of the duel is kind of interesting, but the way they execute it, I personally felt was lame. The duel was a very lame finale between John and Kane. They just step back a little bit, fire a gun, somebody gets hit, or nobody, and then they step forward closer. It was just a very boring way to end a John Wick movie. Like in all of the other sequels, a John Wick 2, John Wick 3, you had finales that were genuinely epic and thrilling. Like the third movie had arguably 2 different finales. You had the stuff with the shotguns at the Continental, and then you had the whole battle between John and Mark Dacascos' character in the glass room. So you had all that stuff going on, all in the finale. Like it was just epic and just all kinds of amazing and awesome. This is just some boring staircase and shots that honestly look like they're green screened. It just really wasn't anything really that epic. It was just a lame, boring, forgettable duel that ends in a way that I really don't care for, but I'm gonna get to that later. But yeah, it's just one of those things where, okay, all right. So that felt lazy and uninspired. The finale compared to the other 2 films, the other 2 sequels. The first film, I'm not going to compare it to the finale here because that was the first movie. They were just trying to figure things out. So the finale on the pier, it was fine for what they were trying to do. But with each installment, they just upped the ante and things got crazier and things just got even more insane when it comes to the setting or when it comes to the carnage or the body count or the type of action that you were seeing. But this is just a duel with old-timey pistols. And prior to that, it was just this scene with John and Kane on this staircase that seems like it's never ending. And yeah, it's just one of those things where the script, I really don't feel it was anywhere near as good as the screenplay as the other three films provided when it comes to their screenplays. And it's not just like the lazy stuff, it's also other things. Like John doesn't really have a lot of lines or a lot of like memorable things to say, let alone much of anything to say except yeah or I know. It's just like, okay, that feels kind of boring. There's too much of an emphasis on these new characters that honestly I don't give two shits about. So these new characters are clearly here to try to establish some new John Wick cinematic universe. And I'm like, you already had a cinematic universe before you introduced Shimazu Koji and his daughter Akira and the Tracker. Like, you already had a cinematic universe with Common's character or Laurence Fishburne's character or Lance Reddick or Ian McShane's Winston. Like, you already had all of that. Or Halle Berry's character in the third film. Like, you already had a cinematic universe at this point with strong, engaging characters. You didn't need to just throw some new characters in here like Kane and Akira and Koji to create some new cinematic universe. Also, it's a ass backwards way to create one to begin with that I do not understand why it's not getting more criticism for it. This would be like if you had the first 4 films in the MCU and you only get introductions to 2 or possibly even 3 major characters who are going to be Avengers in the 4th movie in phase 1. You'd be like, that's fucking random and that doesn't make any sense. And that doesn't feel earned. Exactly. It feels unearned and it feels rushed. And these new characters, I don't think they're that good. I don't think they're that strong. So it takes away from scenes that you could have with John Wick. It takes away from scenes that you could have with Laurence Fishburne's character, the Bowery King, or Winston. It takes away from providing Winston and the Bowery King with more character development and depth, which is something that I would genuinely be curious to see when it comes to the 4th installment in the series, especially if this is intended to be a finale. But no, instead we have all this focus on these secondary new characters because they're going to have spin-offs or they're going to be the focus of some story in the future, and I don't give a fuck. I really don't care, and I don't feel the screenwriters did that good of a job making me care about them other than the fact that they're there and that they exist. And I feel the same way about the villain, the Marquis. And I understand what the thought process is. He's a Wick prick because that's the character. He's a weakling and he tries to take the easy way out and he acts all badass and tough, but he's the opposite. I understand. But I think there's a more clever and a more interesting way that you could have portrayed that aspect of his character. Show him go to extreme lengths to be a coward. Like, to the point where you are genuinely wondering what he's going to do next in order to get out of something. Instead of him just being whiny and insufferable and unlikable. Oh, he killed Sharon. That doesn't really make the character that intimidating. The action that he does is still very cowardly because it's not like he beats him in a fight. So now that I mentioned Sharon, I might as well say, yeah, spoilers, sorry. But I mean, I'm late to the party here talking about John Wick Chapter 4. So many other YouTubers who have already talked about it and have probably already done spoiler reviews. So it's not one of those things where I think I'm like that far out of line. It's not like I'm doing this opening weekend. That being said, spoiled it for you. My apologies. But for the rest of this video, I will definitely be spoiling even more because I can't talk about this script fully without talking about the ending. But yeah, going back to Sharon though for a second, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. It's not just the fact that Lance Reddick is no longer with us, may he rest in peace. It's that that character showed that he could fight and he could be good with a gun in the last film, and he doesn't even get the chance or the opportunity to fight back. I don't think that's an honorable, let alone a worthy death for Sharon as a character. I really don't. I feel it's cheap. It's a cheap just shock when it comes to the script. It's another extension of this script's laziness. And even the stuff with the duel. Like, okay, all John has to do is defeat Fat Scott Adkins in a club, and then he gets accepted back into the family. The family then issues a challenge, a duel, and if John wins the duel, he's free. And I'm like, okay, why couldn't he just do a duel when he still had a connection with the family? Why did he have to break his ticket? Why did he have to do any of this other stuff in the last movie if he could just challenge some high-ranking member of the table to a duel? There's just a lot of stuff when you think about it. It just poses all of these questions and problems with the script for me personally, anyway. And then you have other issues like the tone. This is one of the weirdest entries in the series to date when it comes to its tone. The tone in the other three films, it was tongue-in-cheek. It had its moments of dark humor. But here, it just felt like the humor was either forced or it was just lame and bad. And just the kind of humor that is childish and immature. Scene where a dog pisses on some guy's head. Or another sequence where Fat Scott Adkins is talking about how John shot him in the ass. And even just a whole Fat Scott Adkins sequence. And I know the character has a name, but Killa Harkin is his name. Like, yeah, his name is Killa. How original. But yeah, Killa. And that stuff with Killa is so over the top. It's just a complete and total cartoon. Like, what am I watching? A Captain Planet cartoon with the villain? Is he going to destroy the environment next or some shit? What is going on with this? And it's just too over the top. And it even carried over to some of the action in this movie, where John Wick was flat out superhuman. Like, he wasn't even really that far off from Neo. Falling down numerous flights of stairs like it's nothing, falling off on multiple stories and landing on the car and just brushing it off. All this other stuff that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense that he's able to recover from that as quickly as he does. And including and talk about stuff that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The fucking Kevlar suits that, like, you just put your arm up and it deflects bullets like they're pellets. They really overdid that, the screenwriters, to the point where they made bullets feel like they were nothing. Made bullets feel like they had zero impact. Now, I've criticized a lot of aspects of the script. I've mostly criticized the script, but there are some good things about it. I do like some of the action set pieces. I do think they are creative. I do think they still bring some of the thrills and the excitement that I look for out of a John Wick film. I like some of the stuff in Japan, especially the nunchuck sequences. I like some of the bits in the club, like the stuff with the axes. I like some of the stuff at the Arc de Triomphe. I even like the homage to the Warriors. That didn't really bother me. It just made it so John could have another army of people to fight. But at the same time, it was a little repetitive, not because of the fact that it was a homage to the Warriors, but because it just felt like the same sort of thing that happened. Uh, um, I believe like at the end of the first movie or during one of the other films in the series. I think like the end of the second film. It's been a while since I've seen the first two or three, but there was in one of them he had the price on his head raised, and he was now on the run, and there were all these people trying to hunt him down. It felt kind of repetitive because that was kind of what we already kind of saw, but this time the price is higher, and it's a different location, and that felt like it was really the only difference. But it still led to some nice little fun bits of action, fisticuffs, and martial arts, and gun fu and stuff that you come to love when it comes to a John Wick film. And the stuff on the staircase, despite the moments where he's falling down it and it's kind of ridiculous, I didn't mind some of that either, especially when John is teaming up with Kane and they're both kicking ass together. The Dragon's Breath sequence, I thought that was pretty cool. That was pretty interesting and different and fresh. So, yeah, there are things about this script when it comes to the action in particular that really are effective. And that's what you really look for out of a John Wick film is the action. Is it creative? Is it interesting? Is it exciting? And I think there are sequences in chapter 4 that really do fit that bill. There are other sequences though where it feels a little repetitive, and I definitely do feel that you've seen a lot of this stuff done before or done even better in the other films in the series. Which is why I'm kind of baffled by the claims that this has some of the most epic and amazing action sequences that have ever been put on the screen, because I'm thinking, wait a second, John Wick Chapter 3 had the opening with all the different knives that then translates and moves from that to a sequence with the horses, which was crazy and unlike anything I'd ever seen before in any film. And you had the stuff with the glass room in the climax, and the shotguns sequence with the people with the body armor at the Continental. Here, oh yeah, there's people with body armor again, but we've already seen that in part 3. There's a guy who has a dog and it's trained and it bites people's balls. We already saw that in 3 with Halle Berry's character, and she had 2 dogs. And even the stuff with the axes in the club, even the whole club sequence with Killa. You've seen club scenes before in a John Wick movie, and you've seen them done better in the other films in the series that didn't have Scott Adkins trying to do his best impression of John Leguizamo in Spawn. So, yeah, there are some effective, interesting stuff in this, but I don't see how it's like the best ever. Like that to me, I don't get, and I definitely disagree with. And I definitely disagree with the ending. I never liked this idea. I never felt that it was something that was fitting for John Wick. What works in Logan doesn't work here, because in Logan it's a standalone story that takes place in a different universe. Logan is basically an Elseworld story. It takes place in another universe. It's not really necessarily tied into the main continuity when it comes to Marvel or X-Men or Wolverine. It's its own standalone story. So that is fine to me, the way that it ends. Here, it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel justified. And it's a letdown because of the fact that after everything that John went through, he went through not only just one layer of hell, he went through all 7 layers or levels of hell to get to this point. And the only way for him to be free of anything is for him to die. It's like, that just makes everything feel kind of pointless when it comes to everything that led up to it. And on top of that, I just don't feel it's that heroic or that good. I honestly just feel it's lame. And it's kind of shitty to end the film this way. And whether or not it's a hoax, whether or not he faked his own death, doesn't matter to me. Because you went here. You went here, you jumped the shark, you went to this point, you killed John Wick. Now he's gonna try to come back if there's a John Wick 5. And there very well could be, but there also might not be. Just because it's announced, that doesn't mean it's actually gonna happen. So it's just one of those things where, yeah, I hate this ending. It didn't make me cry. It didn't make me feel like the ending made everything feel like it had so much more power and so much more weight to it. It just annoyed me. It irritated me. Because if anyone deserves an ending where he's able to live out the rest of his life in peace in some cabin somewhere with his dog and the memories of his wife, it's John Wick. This is like at the end of Live Free or Die Hard, John McClane dies of bullet wounds. You'd be like, what the fuck? But here it's like, oh, it's great. It's effective. It's a great way to end the movie. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand why this ending works. To me, it sucks. It's not kind of shitty. It's very shitty. So yeah, I don't like the ending. I think the duel is lame leading up to it. And there's just a lot of stuff about the movie that just isn't really that good. I don't like the new characters, don't care about them. I think the script is lazy when it comes to a lot of different elements. The villain sucks. He's a Wick prick who half the time is doing a bad impression of Van Damme. Half expecting him to be like Van Damme in Street Fighter and talk to John Wick and be like, are you man enough to fight with me? Just bad. Bad villain. The action at times is creative and fun, but at other times it's repetitive. Even the opening action sequence is forgettable. Just go John Wick on horseback in the desert and shoots 3 guys in the back. And it's not like we haven't seen John Wick in the desert. We saw that in the 3rd movie. And that was done better. So yeah, at best it's okay. It's all right. It's serviceable for some of the action, but I know I spent most of this review talking about the script, but that's the majority of the issues that I have with this movie. It comes down to the screenplay, which is why Derek Kolstad, he really is sorely missed. Badly. And I'm really leery, and I'm really kind of afraid of these spin-offs and John Wick 5 or anything else without Kolstad, because this is what we got. Now that I've talked about the script at length, now I could talk about the cast. I mean, Keanu, he's fine. He does the action stuff just as well as he did in the other 3. He's still got a good presence. I don't think he necessarily goes through the motions here, but it's just one of those things where Keanu isn't given as much to work with this script compared to the other films. So he's not given as many sort of wry lines of dialogue. He's not given as many moments to emote or really showcase something extra other than his martial arts skills or his ability to use a gun or a car or other implements to defend himself. Donnie Yen, I was just indifferent on him. I know a lot of people really liked his character, really liked his performance. I was like, it's another blind swordsman, and there were times where he was trying to be charismatic and drop one-liners, and I thought it was pretty cringe. I really did. Like the whole flashbang scene that lasted for like 10 seconds, and then he says something in another language, and then it's translated on the screen, and it says, "Lights out, motherfuckers," or something like that. And I was like, that was not a cool enough scene to warrant a one-liner. And there were some moments where his line delivery was a little flat, I gotta be honest. Bill Skarsgård, Wick prick. Total Wick prick. I did not care for this performance. Not intimidated. Didn't enjoy watching him. I was more annoyed by the guy than anything else. He wasn't a villain that I loved to hate. I just hated him. Like, I didn't want to see this guy on the screen anymore. And that's not a good sign. I didn't like him as Pennywise. It sounded too much like Winnie the Pooh in that film. And didn't like him here. He's capable of being an intimidating, somewhat memorable villain. He was a pretty intimidating and really loathsome character in a movie called Assassination Nation. So he's capable of it, but it's just not here on the screen as the marquee. Laurence Fishburne, he quotes I think he quotes Dante's Inferno at the beginning, and he's barely in it. You don't get anything extra until when it comes to his character. So it just seems like he goes through the motions. The same thing applies to Ian McShane. It feels like both of them are just going through the motions when it comes to their performance in this. Hiroyuki Sanada, it was serviceable as Koji, but I thought he did a better job in Bullet Train. I definitely liked his character more and thought he had more to do, and I felt his performance had more layers to it in that film. Lance Reddick, he's just in there for like a couple minutes to get shot, and that's it. Can't really say much. Rina Sawayama as Akira, I thought she wasn't anything special. I know she's been getting a lot of praise from people. I didn't see it. I thought she was just as impressive as the Asian actress who played what the fuck is her name? The Karai from TMNT, the Michael Bay movies. I thought she was just about as impressive as that actress. I don't get the crazy amount of praise. Like, I didn't think she had that much charisma or personality. I just didn't really think much of anything about her character. Scott Adkins was horrible, embarrassing, just terrible as this guy named Killa. Oh, the Baba Yaga. Ooh, I'm so scared of the Baba Yaga. It's like, what the hell is this performance? It's just, he's channeling his inner John Leguizamo from Spawn. I half expected him to be like, just fart, and then be like, ooh, that was a wet one. So yeah, bad. Awful. Easily the worst performance that I've seen from Scott Adkins. Clancy Brown's in it as the Harbinger. It was nice to see Clancy Brown. But once again, not really much of a role. Should have honestly been the main villain if you think about it. Definitely would have been better than the Wick prick played by Bill Skarsgård. Now, I don't know about some of the other people you could have thrown in there too. Like, what about the actress who played the Adjudicator? What about the Adjudicator character in general? That character is completely forgotten about in this movie. It's like the character doesn't exist anymore. So, yeah, I mean, the performances, they are what they are. I feel a lot of the people involved in this, they've done better jobs in other films. I would say Keanu is probably the best performer out of the entire cast. Now, the cinematography by Dan Lauston, it's there. There are some moments in Paris that I thought were pretty grand and provided some nice spectacle. So did a few of the other sequences, especially the scenes in Japan. I love the way that whole sequence is filmed, especially the stuff in the hotel with the neon lights and everything. The editing by Nathan Orloff, it's there, it's fine. It's definitely at its best when it comes to the action sequences. The music by Tyler Bates and Joel J. Richard. So, most of the same stuff you heard in the other three films, but it works. Still got the main John Wick theme in there. I didn't feel the music choices, like the songs they used, were really that good. That especially compared to some of the other films in the series, like it's had some bad covers of stuff like Paint It Black and other stuff that just really didn't do much for me at all. And it's a movie that's like it's almost 3 hours, and it really does feel like it. That's another problem that I have with this movie. It does not need to be 3 hours. In fact, you could have trimmed out a lot of the stuff with the extraneous characters, the new characters that don't even really need to be there to begin with, because why? Give us more with the Bowery King and Winston, or bring back Common's character. Why do we have to have the tracker, Koji and his daughter Akira and Kane and all this other stuff? Why do we even need any of that? Just overcomplicating things and just making things less effective to me. Just making it bloated. And I really do feel that if this is the grand finale, or if this is like the best the franchise has to offer, because that's what I've been hearing a lot of people say about this film, and if you feel that way, to each their own. But if this is the best, this isn't going to cut it for me. Like, if this is the best, I don't want to see what they have coming up next. I really don't. Because I wasn't that impressed. So yeah, I was very lukewarm on the film. Felt it was so-so. Liked it all right. Not enough that I want to call it a full-on epic rant, because I did like some of the action in it, and that's honestly some of the stuff that I look for out of a John Wick film. But that's not the only thing that I like, or I want to see out of a John Wick film. Yeah, I do want to see good action, but I also want to see strong or somewhat engaging characters other than John Wick. I want to see a villain that I actually feel is like efficient or memorable or charismatic in some way. I mean, one of the few problems I had with John Wick 2 was the villain. But honestly, the adjudicator I thought was better than Skarsgård's Marquis in this. I even felt the guy in part 2 was better, or even Ruby Rose was better, and that's saying a lot. So you have a weak villain, you have the supporting characters are just shoved in down my throat that I don't care for and I don't like. You've got a finale that I felt was a wet fart in the wind on a staircase in front of a green screen. And this is one of those things where, okay, all right, maybe it might be best to leave John Wick dead and buried if this is the kind of stuff that we're going to see going forward.